Lease renewal letter and process. So you have a good tenant whose lease is about to expire. You want to keep them, but you also want more in rent. If you do it wrong, you either lose them or you lose money for the renewal period. Here's how to do it right. Hi, Steve Schultz here from Blue Fox Properties. We've managed thousands of Tucson rental houses since 2009. So the first thing you need to do is decide whether you want to renew the lease. So there are two questions. Question one is, do you want to continue renting? You may have plans for the house. Maybe you plan to sell it. Maybe you plan to move back in. Maybe you plan to rent to a family member. So that's the first step, is do you want to continue renting the property? Assuming the answer to the question is yes, then the next question is, do you want to continue renting to the current tenant? So some things you want to take a look at to make sure that is indeed the case. The first thing is the property check to see the current condition. You want to make sure is everything being well taken care of. Next is looking at the payment history. Were there any issues? Late payments, non-sufficient funds, anything going on there? What about previous homeowner association violations? Again, was there anything going on there of importance? And then lastly, any other lease violations or other concerns while the tenant has rented the property. Now, if you do not want to continue renting the house to the current tenant, regardless of the reason, you will need to send a non-renewal notice to the tenant. And I recommend sending that at least 1 month prior to the lease expiration. Now, one important thing to note here in Arizona is you can non-renew for any reason. Some states actually limit the reasons why you can non-renew. Here in Arizona, it stands today, you can non-renew for any reason. Now, for the remainder of this video, we will assume you do want to renew the current lease. So the next question is, when should you start the renewal process? Now, what we like to do here at Blue Fox Properties is we like to initiate the process about 6 months prior to the lease expiration. Is that a long time in advance? Yes, it is. But what we found is about 30% of our tenants choose to renew well in advance. And that actually gives peace of mind to both parties. The tenant knows that they're locked in and they have a long-term deal and they don't have to worry about moving anytime soon. And the same peace of mind for the landlord. The landlord knows that he or she is going to be getting the rent now for this extended period of time. And so it's really a good thing for both parties. That being said, you could wait until later to renew as well. So the next thing you want to think about is establishing the new rental rate. So what you're trying to establish is the market rental rate. Now, it could be more or less than the current rental rate. And if you need help with this, see my video titled, quote, Tucson Property Management, How to Effectively Price Your Single Family Rental in 2026, end quote. If the current market rent is significantly more, you might want to be careful about how much you actually raise the rent. There are different strategies and philosophies behind that. If the tenant's been a good tenant, taking good care of the property, maybe you don't want to raise the rent all the way to that market rent. On the other hand, maybe there have been some challenges along the way, maybe you do, and kind of everything in between. So it's kind of taking a lot of factors into account, and the thing to remember is if the tenant does leave the property, they're going to have to go pay that market rent somewhere else. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is market rent is just that, and regardless if it's at your property or someone else's, they're going to have to pay that market rent. Now, before we move on to the next item, if you don't want to deal with the lease renewal process yourself or anything else as it relates to the property, contact us about managing your Tucson rental house, and perhaps we are a fit for you. So the next thing you want to do is choose the renewal term. Now, there are two different strategies. One is what's called a fixed term renewal, and this in our case is 12 months or longer. That could be any term you wanted it to be. It's very common to do 12 months in the industry in general, or you could do month to month. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to both scenarios. One of the things that the fixed term does is gives you that predictability. You know when the leases expire and you can plan for it. So that's the thing that it gives you there. On the other hand, a month to month gives flexibility. So let's say it's something where the tenant has decided, hey, we're gonna buy a property, but we need another few months to stay at the current property to rent. That might be a good scenario for a month to month. Or on the other hand, maybe as the landlord, you're not sure what you're gonna do yet. So maybe you offer a month to month extension for the current tenant too. So different strategies on that. In general, we typically recommend a fixed term renewal, 12 months or longer. Now, the next thing you're gonna wanna do is prepare and send the lease renewal letter. Now, really what this is gonna be is it's either gonna be a new lease or an addendum to the existing lease. And there are different pros and cons to each. Now, in the case of sending a new lease, that might be because the existing lease has a lot of terms that you wanna update or change. So that would be one of the reasons why you wanna do a brand new lease. One of the cons to doing a brand new lease is it's more for the tenant to review and ultimately approve. So it can add friction to the process. On the other hand, if you just just do a one-page addendum, you can certainly do that. Very simple, very easy. Well, because it's just one page. And so that's all the tenant has to look at. So again, different strategies depending on the scenario, but remember too, in just the one-page addendum, you can add additional clauses too, or update just specific clauses. So if there was one paragraph, let's say in your existing lease, that you wanted to change or update, you could still address that just in your one-page addendum and just add that on the addendum itself. So what to include in the addendum? You want to include obviously the new rental rate, the lease term, and if there are any other lease changes as well, just like I just mentioned. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to email the lease or addendum via an e-sign tool ideally. So these are things like DocuSign or HelloSign, different tools that can do that. If you have access to that, that's usually the best way to do it. At the same time, if you want to create the file as a PDF, you can email that to them. They can print it, sign it, scan it, and email it back. Or if you want to do the old school way and actually mail it off to them, you can do that as well. The one thing I'd recommend if you do that is to reduce the friction, include a postage paid envelope with it. So all I have to do is sign it, put it in the envelope, send it back, no problem. The other thing I'd recommend you do is give the tenant a response deadline. There are several different ways to do this. One of the most common ways is to provide some sort of incentive. So an incentive could be something so simple as if you respond by a week from now, I'll send you a $25 gift card to Starbucks. It could be something like that. There are other approaches too that actually incentivize people based on the rental rate itself. So the sooner they renew, the lower the rental rate, and the longer they wait, that rental rate goes up. So that's another strategy as well. A lot of different ways to do it, a lot of different philosophies behind that. So once you receive the signed lease or signed addendum, you're good to go. Now there are two common mistakes you want to make sure you avoid. The first one is verbal only agreements. Whatever you do, be it month to month or term, I recommend you put it in writing. Now legally in the state of Arizona, you can do verbal agreements. The problem with that is, should you ever end up in court because things go sideways, it could be a real problem in trying to prove what you agreed to. And the second thing is not checking the property condition prior to renewal. The thing you want to make sure you don't do is renew the tenant if they haven't been taking good care of the property. So you want to make sure you do that property check before the renewal. So that's it for the lease renewal letter. Don't forget to subscribe below, and I'll see you on the next video.